Hello and welcome to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast, a podcast where we discuss all things relating to your well-being, including interviews with experts in the fields of nutrition, physical health and mental health, and my 5-minute food fact series. I'm Amanda Hayes, your host, a nutritionist with a passion for well-being. Before I introduce today's guest, I will take a moment to let you know that you can subscribe to my podcast on YouTube, hit the red subscribe button, or on your favourite podcast app, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify, or Google Podcasts. I will also mention that although I will often be speaking with experts, any information or advice provided in Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast is not intended to be used to treat, cure, or prevent injuries or medical conditions, and is not a substitute for advice from your own health professional. Today I am here with Mark Hurd. Many of us with school-aged children know that school canteens, tuck shops as they're commonly called in Australia, can leave a lot to be desired when it comes to healthy offerings. That might be okay if your child orders from the tuck shop once in a blue moon, but if you need to rely on the tuck shop regularly or your child is a boarder with no other option, this is not a great state of affairs because it does not encourage healthy eating patterns, and one could go as far as to say it discourages it. Another reality of school tuck shops is that they are often outsourced to large companies who are driven by profit and not the well-being of our precious offspring. I've looked at menus from several school tuck shops in Adelaide, where I live, and these are some of the common features. They include highly processed goods like chips or crisps, baked goods like pies, pasties and sausage rolls, sweet baked goods like donuts, sweetened drinks, flavoured milks and iced teas. However, there are also healthy options available like fruit and salad sandwiches, but these are competing with what some children think are more exciting options. Imagine if someone who had a genuine passion for healthy food took over the school canteen and totally transformed it into a place offering healthy food, low in highly processed ingredients like refined sugars. It might sound like a fairy tale, but that's exactly what today's guest, Mark Hurd, and his team have done. Mark's background is in hospitality, in hotels and nightclubs in Sydney in the late 1980s. In 1994, Mark and his now wife Jane returned to Adelaide. In Adelaide, Mark owned 2 organic stores. One was called Organic To Go, where he sold healthy foods, including takeaway healthy foods, and a range of organic foods. During that time also, Mark and his aunt ran a food and juicing course at the Cancer Council to help people understand the benefits of eating well. Mark was also the chair of the Natural Health Association for over 7 years and a member for 26. It recently wound up after 51 successful years. Mark's passion is to help people eat sustainable, organic food, to grow their own where possible, and to recycle whatever they can and encourage people to look after our amazing planet. It is my pleasure to be here with Mark today. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Amanda.
Thank you for coming on today. So, Mark, can you tell us a bit about your career in the food industry?
Certainly. I was drawn to the hospitality industry in the early 80s, and that took me to Sydney, where I was working with a hotel group and, of all things, running nightclubs, which is quite an interesting time of my life.
Yeah, late nights?
Yes, that was 5 o'clock in the morning going to bed,
goodness.
but I was an early riser, so I'd be up around 10 and get as most out of the day as I could.
You moved from working in the hospitality industry to owning and running your own organic stores. So where did your interest in organic food come from?
I guess when I left school and travelled a lot, I ended up living with other blokes, and I was the only one that would be at the stove at night, so it was an early introduction to cooking and learning about food and choosing food, and from that it just became a natural development that the food I enjoyed was pretty much simple food, and I refer to Jamie Oliver's saying that if you want to eat well, eat what the peasants eat. And that was always been, I guess, part of my lifestyle, is to eat simply and well and eat seasonal produce, and of course that then was a natural process to be interested in organic and foods that are without any pesticides or fungicides, so that was easy to accept and adopt.
Did any of that knowledge come from your family? Did you learn to cook as a child, or did you acquire that skill when you were older?
No, being the youngest of five, my lovely mother would cook for the five of us, and in those days it was meat and 3 veg 3 times a day, 7 times a week, so there was no cooking by me at home. It was only once I left home and travelled that developed, and that interest then came from that. So no, I was a late bloomer.
Have you taught your children how to cook? Are they interested in cooking or not?
One is capable and is interested in it. Certainly, the other one thinks everything just comes out of the fridge already made.
Yeah, that sounds a bit like my children.
Yeah.
Oh no, I am teaching them how to cook because I want them to be able to be independent beings when they leave home. So, and can you tell us a bit about your eating and food philosophy? You have touched on that already.
Yes, it was living in the hills, in the Adelaide Hills, for over 20 years. We were lucky to have some land, so it was for me just a great interest to grow things. We had an orchard and we had a veggie garden, and we were able to have access via a bore. So there's just a lot of enjoyment in producing your own food and seeing it grow and sharing it with people. And then from there, I worked for an organic wholesaler out near Paraka for some time, and you meet growers and you see how passionate they are, and that just, you absorb that enthusiasm from them. And then there was an opportunity of an old fruit and veg shop down at Glenelg that came up, and I took that on, and I guess I was a bit ahead of my time, because in those days down at Glenelg the average age was about 90, and there weren't too many
really?
not too many people interested in organic food. So although I did convert some people and they enjoyed it, it was a tough time to introduce organic food at a retail level. Yeah,
because I think it's generally, is this true? It's generally a little bit more expensive?
Yes, you would find that it's changed greatly, but 25 years ago there were more local organic growers who had either had land that their fathers worked and they converted it to organic, and there are a lot of them about. There are less now, but they work on a smaller scale than the big guys do. It's probably more labour intensive. There's less use of machinery. There's no doubt that the product is tastier and
absolutely,
I think better for you. And I think these days there's a lot of knowledge and scientific study that shows that nutritionally it's better for you. So it's always been easy to accept that. But the price point has probably been something that's been a deterrent for a lot of families for a long time. Yeah,
I think that's right, unfortunately. But now we'll move our discussion on to the school canteen that Mark has been involved with. So about 6 years ago, Mark and a team of people from within the Scotch College community, which included some well-known local chefs, took over the school canteen. And Scotch College is an independent co-educational school in Adelaide, just for those of you who don't know. And Mark, I believe it was a bit of a mad scramble to get it up and running because you only had 2 weeks to do it. So how did you pull that off?
It was, it was interesting. It was December 6 years ago, and the principal and the one of the administrators said, would you be interested in running the canteen, because the lease is up and the company we've had run it for a number of years has relinquished it. And I knew that students and staff were a little unhappy with the quality of the food, so I said, certainly. And I said, how much time have you got? And he said, they finish in 2 weeks. I said, that's great.
Love a challenge.
Yeah. And so, as you can imagine, the 2 weeks left of school in term 4 remaining, and that was the end of their lease, they had absolutely no interest in being too helpful to me. So I chatted with them and tried to understand something about their business, but we walked into pretty much an empty canteen. It had a very old stove, a deep fryer, and some benches and a cool room. And over that summer, I had 2 incredible ladies, both who were parents at the school. Kate Sparrow, who was formerly part owner with her husband of Nettie's 2 in Adelaide and Hutt Street, a famous gourmet restaurant.
Absolutely brilliant.
Well known and well respected. She came on board, and also an incredible lady, Angela Taddeo, who's now Angela Bosboom. She started Pasta Deli and had over 20 years experience in producing amazing food. So they both came on board, and their outstanding background and work ethic, and the 3 of us got together and came up with a menu and found some helpers, and we opened on time for the first term the following year.
Yeah, what a great achievement. That's amazing. So can you talk us through some of the practicalities of the menu for a school canteen? So I assume it has to be simple to prepare and cost effective and delicious.
Yes, it does. So we made our goal very easy to look for local seasonal food, fresh daily where possible, looking at suppliers that could produce food that we felt were up to our standards. So foods that we couldn't produce, we looked for suitable suppliers. Our understanding with food was simple. We were only going to deal with wholemeal food, so all our bread and wraps are wholemeal. We decided to make as many of the products as we could, so things like fresh fruit, started making our own hummus, making our own cakes. Kate Sparrow's background was baking as well as many other hats, and so she started making all our chocolate chip cookies, and we would make our brownies would be made with rice flour, so that would be available to gluten-free people. Fresh salads. We would have specials each day, things like honey soy drumsticks and basmati rice, butter chicken with rice and vegetables. We'll do meatball subs, and we give the kids every day, there's a choice of at least 2 main courses as well as all the other regular foods.
That really sounds amazing, because that's really the crux of this conversation. How do you change the existing menu into something healthier that's also delicious? So, and you've clearly managed to do that. What about the planning of the menu? Like, how did you pick dishes that you could produce in large enough quantities that would be tasty? Like, was that something that the chefs helped you with?
Definitely, yes. Our great team. Now, what we'll do is before each term, we'll have a prep day, and on that prep day, 3 or 4 staff come together and they'll make a lot of the main meals, which will then freeze in quantities that we know is for one day. So the butter chicken and many other main courses will be made during that day, frozen, and then we'll simply bring it out. And then each week on a Monday, we let all the staff and students know what the specials are that week. And that's how we prepare our food accordingly, so that you have to manage with what you've got, and we can only do that with an amazing community where we rely on a lot of volunteer parents to come in and help us.
That was one of the other things I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned to me earlier that you'd set up an online system where people can log in and choose a shift. Do you think having this kind of volunteer community has created a sense of community and cohesiveness?
Most definitely. The benefits of parents coming in is that they get involved. They see the students at recess and lunchtime, and they can communicate with their sons or daughters and their friends. They learn a lot about the school. It's better than going to a parents and friends meeting, because
I bet it is.
your first-hand knowledge,
Yeah.
you can talk to, and most of us in the canteen are either current parents or have had kids at the school, so we can share a lot of information, and parents love that contact and learning. They also go home with some great cooking tips, because as they're working with us, they find out how we prepare food.
Mm-hmm.
And there are shortcuts and tips and things that they didn't know about before, and they love that. We give them a lovely cup of organic coffee and morning tea, and we send them home with lunch. So for a 3-hour shift, they enjoy it immensely.
That sounds great. It's a win-win. So do the volunteers need to have any training before they come in and help?
No, not at all. I think some were initially scared that we'd throw them on the cashier at recess and they'd have to remember all the buttons.
That'd be terrifying.
We don't do that. No, look, we've had general practitioners, we've had farmers, we've had eye surgeons, we've had lawyers, we've had nurses, we've had an incredible eclectic mix of parents, and it's simple. If they can cut up and make fruit salad or cut a croissant in half and put something in it, then they're great.
They're qualified.
They are qualified, yeah.
Did you encounter any resistance from either students or staff when you were changing the menu and taking away some of those things like crisps and donuts?
No, it was interesting. I still remember the first day that we opened. The queue was from the front door out and back again. It went for about 40 metres.
Goodness.
And it staggered us, and we were looking, gosh, have we got enough food? We have not had one complaint in 6 years about the quality, about the choice or the range of food in all that time. We've only had incredible students, staff and parents fully supportive of what we're doing.
Oh, that's really wonderful. It does show that if the opportunity is presented, people like to eat healthy, seasonal food, doesn't it? If the choice is there.
Absolutely. I mean, my days going back to a canteen, or we'd call it the tuck shop. It was a Fritz and sauce and white bread sandwich, and possibly a salad sandwich would consist of tomato and cucumber and a piece of lettuce. And
maybe that plastic cheese.
And that rubber cheese. So, no, their sandwiches and their selection have changed. I mean, to have sushi and Vietnamese cold rolls or banh mi rolls and chicken laksa, etc. The kids are all amazed, but as I say, they're very, very grateful and appreciative.
Yeah, that's excellent. The other thing you mentioned is that you've cut down on the number of sweetened drinks available, because, you know, in the modern world where obesity is such a problem, that is one of the main culprits. So what do you offer in terms of beverages?
We deal with a company from Piccadilly, so we get their lovely spring water bottled. We deal with a local Mountain Fresh juices, so again, these are unsweetened local juices. The only other beverage is we deal with Fleury milk, because obviously we've got an espresso machine in the canteen now for hot chocolates and stuff, and for drinks, so we'll use their lovely unhomogenised milk, and we have their flavoured milk and yogurts, and that's it.
That's great. Sometimes I think probably not having too many products is also helpful, you know.
Yeah, I think the size of the facilities you have, the cool room or the fridge space, determines the choices, but no, there's no confectionery. I mean, we have some chips and a Golden North ice cream, and pretty much that's it. The rest of it we make our own cakes, biscuits, muffins, so there's plenty of things that are alternative and tasty instead.
And they're made with real food. That's the thing, isn't it? I think it's okay to have a piece of cake if it's home baked, but not if it's full of palm oil and all sorts of sugar substitutes.
No, and we these days you have to cater for. We've got gluten free. We cater for vegans. So you can we have bliss balls and muesli bars. They're both gluten free. So there is the option for a lot of different types of students, which is so much more evident now.
Yes, it is. People have more knowledge, I think, about food. But having said that, one thing that strikes me is that schools invest a lot of money in health in the form of having counsellors, pastoral care, anti-bullying programs. They encourage physical activity. But what a lot of them turn a blind eye to, one of the fundamentals of well-being, is providing healthy food and therefore modelling good eating behaviour. That, and you've obviously changed that at Scotch College, but do you think that's a problem for most schools?
I think it would be, and you've just reminded me of an amazing conversation I had in our first term in week 3. I had 2 teachers come to me and say, "That's amazing what you're doing." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Do you know that by taking out all the soft drinks and all the confectionery, I've noticed that students in the afternoon are more alert and more awake and not nodding off, and their attention span is far, far more attentive." And that staggered me but surprised me. But I thought, that's great feedback.
Yeah, and that actually has been verified in a recent study where the study examined the association between overall dietary quality and academic performance. And basically the conclusion was that students with a decreased overall dietary quality were significantly more likely to perform poorly. So in other words, students who had a better diet were likely to perform better. So it's what you've said, you've noticed anecdotally, has also been proved scientifically, which is no real surprise. But
no, but it's wonderful that they have noticed it, and it's happening. So that was a great thing to understand and be proud of.
And given that it does make a difference to students, to their overall well-being and to their academic performance, why hasn't it been done in more schools? So what are some of the barriers, do you think?
I think what I can see from other schools and listening to parents, because we have parents at our school that may have children at another school, and I'll ask the question of what's the food like, or they'll comment that the food is poor. Unfortunately, what seems to be happening is large catering companies are going in and running a school, whether it's a boarding kitchen or a canteen, in its entirety, and so it's their decision as to what they make. The school might have a little bit of influence, but unfortunately it's really up to that caterer. At our school at Scotch, we're lucky that our boarding kitchen and our canteen are run and owned by the school and are operated by our own staff, so we have the choice of what we give them to eat. And I think that is difficult at other schools where that choice is taken away from them, even to the point of providing afternoon tea or morning tea at a sports function. Like if you're hosting another school, the parents aren't allowed to do it.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. At my kids' school, football, the parents supply the afternoon tea, which is good because it's usually home baked. So I think what you're saying is when these large companies come in and manage the school canteen, they are largely driven by profit, I think, and the bottom line, obviously not the well-being of our beautiful children. So,
no, there's a lot more frozen food coming in packets and ending up either in a deep fryer or an oven and coming to life.
Yeah, if you can call it that.
Yeah.
So can you tell us about some of the things you've learned along the way?
Certainly. Is this just from the canteen or just in general?
Oh, just from the canteen.
Yeah. What we've found is that the variety of food that students and staff now want to explore is absolutely endless. There's always opportunities to improve or make things different. Let's take salads, for example. We constantly change salads because people can get tired or bored of seeing the same thing, so we're always changing, whether it's a winter salad, whether it's a summer salad. So we're looking for things that people would normally like to eat in the climate that's available at that time. So we do change seasonally what we offer them. So that's been one learning. We've learnt to do more with less, because at one stage we had over 150 volunteers. We're down to about 50. And so one change, it doesn't affect the quality of the food, it just changes how you prepare the food.
Right.
So we've got better at doing working more efficiently, preparing food quicker and in larger volume with less helpers. So one always has to adapt.
Yes. Yeah, it's an ongoing process, isn't it?
Yeah.
And more generally, what have you learnt about eating organic food and seasonal food? Like, do you think it's changed your view of your own health and how you feel when you eat organic
Most
food?
definitely, yeah. I mean, I go to a farmer's market every Sunday to source the things that we eat at home. Organic food is now, through certain supermarkets, become much more available and accessible, and I think that's brilliant. Even though the organic stores aren't as prevalent, it's still good to see that organic food is readily available and can be sourced. So that interest and desire is still there, and that'll never go away, because I just have so much belief in it. I belong to a biodynamic association in the Adelaide Hills, which I love learning from other people that have properties and grow their own food or produce their own grains and crops, and you always are listening and learning as to how you can grow things without the use of any chemicals, and I totally support that.
Oh, that's really interesting. So is that a group of people that comes together to discuss these things?
Yes, two well-known people. I mean, I think most people in Adelaide would be familiar with the Paris Creek Biodynamic Farm. Uli and Helmut Sprans ran it for 30 years. They've recently sold it, but they are biodynamic farmers, and they formed a group many years ago, and so I attend that each month. And yes, you listen and learn, and we do some crazy things like fill up cow horns with manure and bury them in the ground, and 6 months later dig them up, and that becomes their manure and their formulas, so they don't have to buy any manures for their properties. It's quite fascinating.
Yeah, and the other thing is it tastes absolutely delicious.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think once you look at organic or biodynamic food, it's not just food, but it's a lifestyle. You look at the land, you look at the environment, you look at what you can do, whether you recycle what you put back into your soil. It just becomes, or for me and our family, it's just a natural process. You just keep expanding your knowledge, but you never lose your belief.
Because the soil is a living thing.
Absolutely. And I mean, in Adelaide there's some wonderful, there's the Rare Fruit Society. I used to belong to the Natural Health Society, which went for over 50 years, but there are so many dedicated groups. But now, of course, one can just go online and find information, which is brilliant.
Yes.
And still expand our knowledge of how to grow things. But yeah, it comes down to the soil. If we look after the soil, plants are stronger and healthier, less susceptible to disease, except for gall wasp, Amanda. I haven't solved that one yet.
No, we've had some of them in our lemon tree, I think. I think one of the problems with monoculture is that it does kill the soil, and so you have to keep on heaping on more and more chemicals and pesticides, and that just obviously can't be good.
No, I think the sustainable growers that I speak to, there's a lot to do with companion planting, rotation of crops, green manure crops, which all are adding nitrogen back into the soil and looking after the soil so it's healthy, and then it's able to produce another crop next year, or if it's had a year off, it's just not getting continually hammered into the ground.
Yeah, it's so important, and I think people are waking up to that. Obviously, you already know that, but when you think about the US and those massive grain farms and whatever they have over there, it's
the feed lots, and I think I don't know the actual statistics, but I think the amount of food that is produced in America, an enormous amount of it goes towards producing food just for animals, not for people.
It does. Yeah, it does. There is something like 60%, or I'll probably have that wrong. And the other problem with that is the huge use of antibiotics, because the animals are not eating what they're naturally supposed to eat, so therefore they get sick.
It's probably probably changed, but I think when I last looked at it about 25 years ago, at some stage 80% of the world's production of antibiotics was fed to animals.
Yeah, I've heard a similar statistic, which is scary.
It is.
Anyway, I think we'll wrap up this conversation. So thank you so much for coming today, Mark. And I'd just like to ask my final question that I ask to all my guests. If you could recommend 2 things that all people could do to improve their well-being, what would they be? The
thing that comes to mind is the 80-20 rule. I think if you focus on 80% of the time making an effort to eat well or thinking about your food, then that other 20% allows you to have fun and play with food. You know, if you go to somewhere you don't feel good about having an ice cream or a pizza or a drink, it's just that's normal and that's part of life. But for me, it's easy because I constantly think about what I'm eating. It's not a chore. But I just think just give more time and energy as to what you're eating and see what also you can grow at home, because it gives you a lot of pleasure. I mean, fresh basil or fresh tomatoes out of your garden in summer are amazing. Growing lettuces, you can do that in spring and in early during winter, which can amaze people. But just get involved and enjoy it, and once you do, just share that knowledge with your family and others.
And get your hands dirty.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks a lot, Amanda.
You can subscribe to Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast on YouTube. Hit the subscribe button, and while you're there, click on the bell to be alerted when new episodes are available. You can also subscribe on your favourite podcast app, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, Spotify or Google Podcasts. And you can follow the podcast on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Direct links to all social media can be found on the subscribe page of my website at www.amandaswellbeingpodcast.com. If you would like to contact me, you can send me a message via the contacts page on my website. Please feel free to suggest topics you'd like to learn more about and people you'd like to hear interviewed, and I will do my best to deliver that to you. Producing the podcast is a labour of love. We put in a lot of time, effort and money behind the scenes. So if you enjoy Amanda's Wellbeing Podcast and would like to make a contribution via Patreon, PayPal or by Amazon to help ensure we continue to provide you with excellent content, please visit the contribute page on my website. Finally, please take a minute to leave a rating on iTunes. It improves visibility and will help me source excellent guests. Thank you for tuning in. Eat well, move well, think well.